Welcome back. So once you have done with create account provisioning policy form, you have done with access model and the development you need for creating account, like for every attribute you have configured in create account provisioning policy form, the mappings, so the respective development and rules, whatever it is required. Once you have taken care of that, an account will be created when the user is requested, or if you have defined the automated assignment criteria in your roles, or one or the other way user will get the account, so as per your requirements. Once user account is created in the target application, it is quite common that user data will be modified. Let's say they update their last name, or they change the department, even their email can be changed. So it is quite common that in foreign countries, when they get married, women change their last name. It is quite common. It depends on every country, and sometimes you can change your preferred name as well. That is also allowed in some countries and some organizations. You change the department, and you can change your email as well. In case if it is long, you can make it short. When you change your last name, your email can be modified. You would move to different department, your manager will be changed. When you get promoted, your job title will be changed also when you move to a different location. So these kind of data, right, will be modified. And where do we get this data? HR source. That's the source of truth, right? Or authoritative application. When you change the data in HR system, the same data has to be reflected in every target application. For example, I'll give you a scenario. Let's say that a woman got married and they updated their last name. Or I'll take a negative scenario. A woman got divorced and then her last name was partner name. Okay, now she changed it. I mean, it's nothing personal or offensive I'm talking about. It's a scenario for us. So, a woman got divorced, and their last name was their ex-husband name, last name. Yeah, they can have that. So, in the last name, the standard will be either you can have your own last name or you can have your partner last name as well. Okay, so now she wants to change the last name, so she applied the changes in HR system that got approved and the data is updated. But you haven't updated that last name in the downstream applications, let's say for example Active Directory. So when if you are using Microsoft ecosystem or even a different ecosystem as well. So if you consider Microsoft ecosystem, you are using Microsoft Teams, Outlook. So when you go to Teams, the name what is displayed is not updated. Still it shows old partner name. She will be furious. She will might escalate even that, hey guys, I have changed my name couple of days back. Still I see old name only. Yeah, it's really, if I consider personal or if I consider emotions there, it will be nothing wrong if she escalates on us even. So that's one scenario I'm saying which can be escalated. Okay, remaining scenarios it might not be escalated, but it's our responsibility to make sure that the data is updated or synchronized to all the downstream applications as per the HR system. See, I don't care about what data is there. What I care about is, do I have my downstream applications up to date with HR system or not? That's what my responsibility is. Okay, so that is where we get into attribute sync. So we need to identify which all attributes need to have sync or synchronization in the target application. Okay, so we need to create identity attributes for sync. Why? I will answer that in a minute. So do not enable sync for a couple of days. So when you onboard in any business application, do not enable the attribute sync immediately. Why? Because in your target application, the data might be different. For example, HR has a different data and your target application has different data, not for every attribute, for some attributes. Yeah, it's quite common. If your data is not properly handled in every system, there will be discontinuities or discrepancies in the data. It's quite common. So if you enable that, the data will be automatically, I mean, if you enable the attribute sync, the data at application side will be overridden from the HR system. Maybe it is wanted, maybe it is unwanted, but why should we, the people who took the decision? right? So do not enable the attribute sync immediately once you onboarded the application. Wait for a couple of days, pull the data, compare the data what you have in HR system, or I mean you can pull the reports from SailPoint or any other IGA tools even. You check that what is the data in application side, what is the data you have in your system, which you have got from HR system. Okay, so and compare, see if there are any differences for the existing data. For new users, no problem. Whatever the accounts that are created from SailPoint, no problem. In future, you can modify them. But in case, if there are a lot of users already existing in the application, it's not like in case, obviously, there will be a lot of data existing in the target application. Then we need to be careful what we are doing about the attribute sync, because we should not change the existing data until unless it is required and a decision should be taken. Okay, so sometimes I have seen in my experience that what I have done was really a legitimate work, valid work only. Still, I was asked, I was questioned like, why did you enable it before asking us? Something like that you will get, which I don't want to. What my job is, I will do the data analysis. I will tell what I can do. Is it okay for you or not? So I'll take the confirmation from them. In case if what we did is wrong, we should not be the people, you know, got escalated or responsible for that. Okay, that's why we need to run the reports before enabling the attribute sync. And next, whenever you change the attribute mapping in the create account provisioning policy form, you need to check the attribute sync configuration as well. Let me show you in Identity now how it looks like, and explain some of these points in detail also in IdentityIQ as well. So if you carefully observe your create account provisioning policy form, I'm taking Active Directory for example. So you have, as we already discussed in provisioning session, for an attribute, you can have these type of mappings. Disable means it will not be included in your provisioning operations. Static means as any static value you can use. This is nothing but a static transform in the backend. Generator, you have different type of generators like creating unique account ID or password generator, or you can build cloud rules. Those rules will be available to you here as a generator. And identity attributes. So you have created identity attributes in your identity profile. Those attributes you can make use of these things here. For example, for display name, identity attribute mapping. So we are using display name. Other attributes will be available, whatever the attributes you have created in your identity profile. Okay. Only the attributes here, account attribute, which has the mapping as identity attribute, will be available for attribute sync. Okay, now if you look at attribute sync, SAM account name not an identity attribute mapping, distinguished name not an identity attribute mapping, object type not an identity attribute mapping, these attributes will not be available in attribute sync. Okay, this will be not available for attribute sync. Why? Because you create identity attribute that will get the data from HR system. So if there are any changes in HR system, your identity attributes will be modified. Okay, so when those identity attributes are modified, target system has to be updated as well or synchronized as well, those changes. That is the mindset behind our reason behind why only identity attribute mapping based attributes will be available for attributes. Okay, in case for example, if you go back to your create account provisioning policy form, let's say object type, for example, you have defined it as a static, it is now user. Do you need this for attribute sync as well? You would like to change the type from user to something else. Example I'm telling you, okay, it doesn't make any sense, but example. Okay, then you should not use as a generator or static. What you need to do is you need to create an attribute, identity attribute for this. Let's say AD object type, you will create as an identity attribute in your identity profile. Then you need to change it to identity attribute, and then you select that attribute here, for example. Okay, then once you save it, then you will have it in the attribute sync, that attribute as well. I'm discarding the changes, you will see them. Okay, next, whatever the attributes you have selected the mapping as identity attribute, those will be available under attribute sync, and those are available for enable or disable flag will be there. So it doesn't need to be mandated that all the attribute synchronization should be enabled, correct? you have the control over which should be enabled, which should be disabled or not. You can have the control. Okay, and next you need to look into these attributes here. For example, display name, can a user display name is modified? Yeah, it can be modified, so you can enable the attribute sync for this. Work email, for Active Directory, email will not be modified. Email is generated in Active Directory, so you do not need to synchronize to Active Directory. Other applications, yes, you need to enable the attribute sync for email. Next, given name, yeah, there are chances. Family name, yes, there are chances. Mobile number, yes, there are chances. You can enable that. Okay, so there will be unique attributes, like for example, if you go back to create account provisioning policy form, uh, SAM account name, we are generating using first name and last name and counter to have a unique value. Instead, you can use, it depends on your requirement, you can use employee ID as well as your SAM account name. Okay, so in case if I select my SAM account name as identity attribute employee uh, uh, ID or employee number, let's say that I'll select employee ID, for example, employee number, and I save it here. And then if I go back to my attribute sync, I have my employee number SAM account name. You can enable it, but I recommend you not to enable this. Why? Employee number will never change. When it never changes, what is the point of enabling attribute sync? That's why it is not recommended to enable the attribute sync for the attributes which will never change. Why I'm stressing it out? What if even if you enable, there is nothing harm, but actually it is not recommended to enable attribute sync for unique attributes in the application. Okay, because those things will never change, and it is not a good idea to enable them as well. Unnecessarily performance issues. When you enable it, it will cross check if there are any changes or not, whether it should sync any data or not. Waste of time even for that. Am I concerned about that? Actually, no. Actually, there is a valid point here. That's why I brought it, you know, this point to discuss. See, for example, you have, I mean, I don't think you will be working on an application which doesn't have any data at all. Okay, I don't think you will onboard any application which is a brand new application which doesn't have any data at all. It's a fresh application and you are going to onboard the users from SailPoint. I don't think you will get into such kind of applications. Very rare. So in case if you have them, no issues. You have nothing to worry about. You can enable everything, no problem, as long as if there is no existing data. When you have existing data, you need to make sure that you are not going to impact the existing data. Okay, so it's very simple in IT. It's okay if you do not do or if you do not bring additional features, but let's not break the existing system. Okay, so you should not impact the existing data. I'll give you a scenario. At application side, we have a username attribute. That username is is generated in different formats. Let's say using first letter of the first name and last name, and then some counter. Sometimes they use employee ID, sometimes they use something else. So there is no proper format even. They have created manually. They have used sometimes some formats. Again, they change. So in simple words, to conclude that they don't have any proper format or a single unique format. Okay, so now you have discussed that. Okay, from now on, whatever is there, that's okay. From now onwards, we are not we will generate the username in this format. Either you use employee number or you generate using first letter of the first name and last name or something else, something discussion agreed for a format, and you started creating the users with that format. In case if you enable attribute sync for that username attribute, it will change the existing usernames. Then no user will be able to log into their system. Okay, so don't do that. My suggestion is do not enable attribute sync for unique attributes at all, because those never changes. In case if there is some attribute which will change, you can enable them, but please make sure that it should not impact the existing data. You need to be careful about that. That's why I'm asking you, before enabling attribute sync, if you are not enabling attribute sync, ignore that. If you are enabling attribute sync, please have a data analysis, see the impact, what will happen, what is the current data in application, what is the data you have in your application, how it can change in future. Have some analysis, discuss with your application team and take the decision accordingly. But my suggestion, do not enable attribute sync for unique attributes. That's it. I will not ever enable. Whenever I onboard an application, I will not enable attribute sync in the first day itself. I will wait for a couple of days. I will try to pull the reports, existing data and what is the data in SailPoint from HR system. I'll compare and then I'll take the decision to enable or not. In case if there is no issue, if there is no data discrepancies, I will enable immediately. In case if there are data discrepancies, those needs to be addressed. I'll have a discussion with application team. Okay. Next last thing is, for example, I have enabled attribute sync for, let's say, given name enabled. Okay, given name is I enable the attribute sync. Now I'll go to create account provisioning policy form, and then I will change the mapping for given name attribute. So currently it is given name, right? Let's say that I change it to something else. For example, display name. I'm just taking an example. I saved it. Now if I go to attribute sync, still for given name, it's given name only. It doesn't modify here display name automatically. Okay, so what you need to do is you need to disable this attribute sync first, and then reload the page. Now you see uh, given name is updated with display name attribute. Okay, this is another, I do not know whether to call it as a bug or what it is. I have reported this to SailPoint, but they didn't care about this. So whenever you change the attribute mapping here in your create provisioning policy form, also cross check whether those uh, changes are reflected here or not. It won't be reflected. I would call it as a bug personally, but I don't know, it is what it is. I wish that this is taken care of, but since it is enabled attribute sync, it is kind of like locked. Even if you change those attribute mapping and you create account form, it will not change. That is advantage as well sometimes. I have used it for some requirements, but yeah, just be informed that or aware that if you change the attribute mapping in create account provisioning policy form, it will not automatically change in attribute sync if it is enabled. You need to modify it. Now, how? Disable the attribute sync first, reload the page, the updated attribute mapping will appear here, then you can enable it. Okay, next I'll go back to create account form and I'll revert back the changes I have done. For example, Sam account name, I'll go back to generator. I'll use create account, create unique account ID, and I'm gonna use dollar first name, dollar last name, and then counter. This is what you're supposed to use. It depends on your requirements. And then for given name, I'll change back to given name. Then save it. Now if I go back to attribute sync, since nothing is enabled, so those will be updated automatically. So given name is given name, Sam account name is disappeared, right? In case if I have enabled attribute sync, then it will not be disabled, disappear automatically, or changes reflected automatically. Okay, I can give an example here. So once I have seen a scenario where in one of my projects, so we were using email address. Okay, so we wanted to sync a different attribute, so we deleted one attribute and we have used some other attribute in create account provisioning policy form. But the guy who did that, my team member, he forgot to update in attribute sync. So after some time the attribute sync has happened, then all the users email became null because the attribute which we have here doesn't exist in the attribute sync, because those attribute was deleted from identity profile completely. So that attribute itself doesn't exist. So there is no value for that attribute. So it synchronized null to the all users. So because of that, no user was able to log in. And then we got an issue, and we realized that it was a P2 issue. It's P2 is very big. P1 is, I don't, I should pray that you should never see that P1 issue. Um, I mean, at least with your works, but P2 is what maximum we will get. So that P2 issue is like a biggest issue what we can see. No user was able to log in. Then what I did, and then I disabled the attribute sync. I reloaded the page, and then enabled the attribute sync. Then again, refresh the identities, or refresh the identity profile. Attribute sync executes, and all users' email was updated. It took some time, but we couldn't avoid P2 issue. So this is how it looks like in IdentityIQ. When you click on gear icon, global settings, then you have identity mappings here. So identity mappings in IdentityIQ is nothing but identity profile in IdentityNow. Okay, so there we create identity profile for each and every HR system or authoritative source. Here we won't create something like that. We will have all the identity attributes. Now you can have mappings for these attributes. Okay, for example, display name. Let's say that we have three HR systems. In SailPoint identity now, you create three identity profiles. In each identity profile, you have mapping. So total three mappings, which is reading, let's say, display name from three HR systems. Here in Identity IQ, you will have only one attribute, and you can have three source mappings. You can select the application, or you can have the rules, and then have the mappings accordingly. Similarly, you can have target mapping. Whenever there is a whenever you run the aggregations on any HR system data, you have it here. Or it doesn't need to be HR system even for the source mapping. You can have any source, even target application as well. Whenever this attribute is getting changed, then target mappings will be executed. You can have the target, you can select which application is the target, what is the attribute, and if you want to apply a transformation rule as well. Okay, this I like. You have a lot of flexibility, whereas if you take in identity now, it has to be identity attribute mapping only in create account form, otherwise it will not be available in attributes. Okay, so in high level you will see more or less same only, but identity IQ will have high flexibility. Okay, this is where you have attribute sync, but when it comes to identity now, you have attribute sync inside the source. Here in Identity IQ, you will have attribute sync as a target mapping in the attribute itself. So you can have for different applications here, attribute sync. There it is consolidated per application. Here it is consolidated per attribute. Okay, there are some differences with respect to the look and feel and whereabouts, but functionality is same. Okay, that is the reason why I'm stressing these all points. Otherwise, it's not fun for me to stress out these points. Okay, there is a reason, there is a business use case behind everything what I'm trying to explain it to you guys. Follow them, safeguard yourself, do not go into the issues, and have a peaceful life. That is about attribute sync. Follow the instructions, and see you in next session.